All right, today we are diving into one of the most foundational origin stories out there, from Genesis chapters 9 through 11. It's a story that tries to tackle a really big question. How in the world did we go from just one family to a planet filled with countless different nations? So, yeah, let's get right into it. The big question we're tackling is this: how did one single family, fresh off an ark, become this entire world of different nations and languages? Well, the text lays it out like a fascinating domino effect. We're going to see how three stories, which might seem disconnected at first, actually lock together to give us one big cohesive answer. You know, the first domino to fall isn't actually an event, it's a prophecy. Right after the flood, Noah says these three really powerful things about his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And what's key here is that we're told to think of these not just as some angry curse, but more like a blueprint for the entire future of humanity. Okay, so check out how this blueprint gets broken down. For Ham's line, specifically through Canaan, the whole servant of servants thing is seen as political destiny. I mean, think about it. The Canaanites were historically squeezed between these huge superpowers like Egypt and Mesopotamia. They never really got to be a major power on their own. Then you have Shem. The phrase, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem," well, that's seen as setting his family line apart. It's the spiritual lineage, the one through which this promised seed would eventually come. And finally, Japheth. God shall enlarge Japheth. This points to huge territorial growth and military power. We're talking about groups like the Greeks and Romans who, eventually did conquer Shem's lands. So the takeaway here is crucial. This isn't about three guys. It's a geopolitical map of the ancient world in prophecy form. So, okay, you've got the prophecy, but how does it actually start to play out? Well, you turn the page to the very next chapter, Genesis 10, and it's basically a who's who of the ancient world. It literally maps these destinies onto real people and real places. This chapter is famously called the Table of Nations, and honestly, it's pretty unique in ancient literature. You find other flood stories, other creation myths, but a document like this, it's really one of a kind. You should think of it like an ancient map, but it's also a family tree, not of individuals, but of peoples. For the ancient Israelites reading this, it was their way of understanding who they were and how they fit in with all the nations around them. And if you look closely at the text, it gives you clues that this is about nations. It's all in the original Hebrew. For example, when you see a name ending in M, like Mizraim for Egypt, that's a plural form. It means the Egyptian people. Same with the ite ending, like Jebusite. It's kind of like us saying the Englishman. Now, there is one major exception here, and that's Nimrod. He's presented as this singular, powerful guy who founded kingdoms, including Babel. And, oh, this is important, the chapter already mentions different tongues and lands. It's literally setting the stage for what's about to happen. And that brings us to the next domino, the conflict in chapter 11. Of course, I'm talking about the story of the Tower of Babel. And this isn't just about some ambitious construction project. No, it's framed as a direct, all-in rebellion against that original plan to spread out and fill the earth. I mean, just listen to what the builders themselves say. Their motive is right there in the open. This wasn't about trying to literally reach God in heaven. It was all about human power. They say they want to make a name for themselves, which is a classic theme of human pride in Genesis. And crucially, they want to avoid being scattered. They are actively, deliberately defying the command to spread out. They're choosing to centralize, to consolidate their power. So what exactly was this tower anyway? Most of us probably picture a ziggurat, right? One of those stepped religious temples. But there's another way to look at it. The actual Hebrew word used is migdal, and that word is often used in other places to describe a military tower, a fortification. This hints that maybe the whole project wasn't religious at all, but political. Maybe it was an attempt to build a fortified, central command post for a tyrannical human empire, a fortress to control everyone from. Well, as you can imagine, this rebellion leads right to the story's climax. God intervenes. This is the final domino that not only stops the rebellion at Babel, but in doing so, creates the world of diverse languages and cultures that we know today. But how did it happen exactly? This is where it gets really interesting. The text leaves room for a big question, kind of a chicken or the egg scenario. Did God first confuse their languages, and that's what made them scatter? Or did God scatter them first, and then, over time, being separated is what caused all the different languages to develop? So there are really two main theories here. Theory A is probably the one you've heard before. God performs a direct miracle, instantly confusing their languages. People can't understand each other anymore, so they split up into groups that can. Theory B is a little different. It suggests the miracle was the scattering itself, and the different languages just developed naturally over time because of that isolation. And, of course, it's totally possible it was a little bit of both. And this is where things get really cool, because this ancient story bumps up against modern science. Linguists today have found that while they can't trace every language back to a single source, they can trace the thousands of languages we have back to a pretty small number of original stock language families. So the idea of a sudden split into a few core language groups that then branched out, it's actually a pretty plausible idea, scientifically speaking. So let's pull it all together. What happens when you line up all these dominoes? Well, you don't just get 3 random stories. You get one single, incredibly powerful narrative all about identity. Let's just quickly walk through that flow one more time. First, you have Noah's prophecy. That sets the destiny for humanity, politically and spiritually. Second, you get the Table of Nations, which is the map showing that destiny playing out across the world. Third, humanity rebels at Babel, trying to grab centralized power. And fourth, divine intervention steps in and forces the original plan and creates the diverse world of nations we have today. See, it's a chain reaction. And this is the real takeaway. For the ancient Israelites who first heard this, it wasn't just a cool story. It was a complete explanation for their world, for their reality. It answered all the big questions they had. Where do we come from? Why are our neighbors in Egypt and Mesopotamia so powerful? Why are we always fighting with the Canaanites? And, maybe most importantly, what's our unique place in all of this? This whole narrative was, for them, their story of identity. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. This ancient, interconnected story gave a whole people their sense of place and purpose in the world. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the origin stories we tell ourselves today about our families, our countries, our communities? And how do those stories still, right now, define who we are?